The following is a special presentation of MTN, the Montana Television Network. Made possible in part by the Greater Montana Foundation. The Greater Montana Foundation, founded by Montana broadcasting pioneer Ed Craney, supports communications on issues, trends, and values of importance to all Montanans.
Butte, Montana is the people. And I always said it only could have been done in Butte, Montana. Where else in the world could people of all walks of life and all religions, and some with no religions at all, all banded together to do a project, and they did that for the Lady of the Rockies. That's why we love Butte, and that's why Butte is what it is today. My wife got sick on December 29th of 1979. She went into the hospital for an emergency operation, and so that I asked a lady to pray to her son for me, and if she would make her okay, then I would build a statue. I love my wife, and I wanted her to be well. Next morning, when I looked up on the East Ridge and seen Saddle Rock, and I thought, why not put it up there?
There are many versions of the story, many ways it can be told, but this is how those that were there remember. Remember building the lady, those that turned a husband's pledge into a monument and turned the lady into an enduring tribute to all women.
Well, I heard about Our Lady of the Rockies when it first started, when they first started construction over in Roberts Yard. So I thought, why not use my skills to help out?
That was a wonderful idea. Very, very, just, it's a blessing to be up there, you know.
Well, I heard about it and liked it, and so I went down and inquired about it and started helping them.
I thought, well, sure, I can contribute where I can. And my wife, she insisted. She said, you gotta get involved.
When they said they was gonna build a statue on the East Ridge, didn't make no difference to me what they put up here. I didn't really think nothing of it.
And at the time, I sort of thought it was a half joke, you know, he had so many crazy ideas that I wasn't sure if this was real or not.
Well, he said a little statue, and I thought, well, that wouldn't be bad. We could go up and just set it on the outside edge. Finally, he said, well, we settled on a 90-foot statue, and I said, boy, looking at this ridge, we got a lot of work to do.
The statue would eventually sit at the edge of the East Ridge on the Great Divide overlooking Butte. But after making the promise and beginning to gather the people to build it, Bob and the Lady of the Rockies project encountered their first major hurdle.
We didn't know who owned that land. Looking into those mining claims, my wife did most of that, and that's a big can of worms you never want to open.
Finding the landowners of the proposed site would ultimately take months of tedious work poring over maps, mining claims, and land leases. With the help of his wife and many others, their work would pay off after discovering a local family owned the parcel they wished to build on.
Well, our families had a special relationship with the Blessed Mother, so we thought that if we could do anything that was good and worthwhile and faith-filled, that would be it. Our family owned the mining claim. I didn't give an answer immediately because I had to talk with other members of our family. You can imagine what the reaction would be to anyone who said they're going to put a statue up there that they said would be just a slight larger than the Statue of Liberty. My question to them is if they had taken their medication that morning, because I thought maybe they had a little problem without their medication.
His reaction, I talked to him and his father, and they told me that to call him about Wednesday. This was like on a Friday. Driving out to Whitehall, my heart was kind of broke. And my wife said, what's going on? And I said, well, maybe we're not going to get the land. She said, well, what if somebody come out here to Whitehall and said that they want to put a statue on your land and they just want to take over? She said, wouldn't you have to think about it?
It was an impossible dream that they had. Bob O'Bill and Joe Roberts, both wonderful people, both great supporters of our city.
So I called back Wednesday, and that's when Guy said, yeah, we'll give you the land. So without Guy Ocello, it never could have happened.
With the land secured from the Ocellos, the project began to move forward in earnest in the winter of 1981. A key member of that group, Mike Cerise. Cerise would lead the charge to build a road to the top of the mountain, a road built entirely with borrowed equipment, donated fuel, and volunteer labor.
Took a lot of blasting, a lot of pushing, a lot of work, period. We'd make sometimes pretty good progress. The next day, we'd take and cut a little more and a little more. We got down to one spot and we hit a real bad section of swamp. And I got stuck in it. And Bob said, boy, now we're in. He said, how are we getting out?
Building the road up the side of a mountain became increasingly costly to the project and nearly bankrupted the enterprise.
But one time we were down to $14 in a fund, and it didn't look very good.
One night, Bob O'Bill come down off the mountain, and he told me, he said, we're done. And I said, what do you mean you're done? And he says, we're out of fuel. We have no money to buy any more fuel. A couple days went by, and Roberts got a hold of me, and he says, down at Gilman's down there, there's 100 haul trucks down there. And he says, we got the contract to tear them down and ship them to Wyoming. So I walked over to the fuel tanks, and I opened them up. I couldn't believe my eyes. They were filled to the gills.
We got some more diesel fuel from the trucks that were being shipped out of town.
I said, I thought the lady was going to furnish the money. I didn't think she was going to furnish the fuel itself.
So after that, we never ever thought that it wouldn't be done.
Many times in our lives, you're not sure about spirituality. The amount of steel that came, and all of a sudden it would be provided for. Everything we asked up there of Mary that we got. You can go right from the beginning, and it's just like pretty soon you get to the point where you say, wait a minute. You know, we were here, but somebody was saying, you know, I want my statue on the mountain, and you guys are going to do it.
As the road neared completion in the summer of 1981, plans for the construction and the placement of the lady began taking shape. Bob O'Bill, Mike Cerise, and Al Beavis surveyed the East Ridge looking for the best place for the lady.
Well, Bob told me, he said, before you top off the road, get to the top, he said, hold up. He said, I want to get in the cat with you. I want to go over the top with you. So we got in and we both went over the top and got on a level. And he said, okay, now, where do we put the lady? And we looked around. I said, underneath Lamb Rock. He said, what do you mean Lamb Rock? And I looked up and he looked up. He said, oh, my God.
Under Al Beavis's guidance, the crew began painstakingly blasting away a section of the East Ridge, carving out only 4 or 5 feet of material with each blast.
And to look up to that mountain and figure to literally take a section of that out to place a statue up there was more or less it was a goal. It became a goal then.
The drilling and blasting would take nearly 4 years to complete. In the summer of 1984, the blast area was now large enough for the rebar and concrete foundation.
I was pitching horseshoes with Bill Barth. And Bill said, "What are you doing tomorrow, Cass?" I said, "Oh, I don't know. Why?" He said, "How about going on the mountain with me?" He said, "I got a survey where they're going to put the legs for the statue." Thought I hadn't been on the mountain for about 10 years, I think. I said, "Yeah, I'm going to come up with him."
The circular formation of the base would require 200 yards of concrete and 4 legs that would anchor the steel skeleton to the mountain.
Plans called for placing these bolts 20 foot long, so we decided the best way to do it is to drill 4 small shafts. They were about 4 by 7, and it called for circular rebar in concentric circles every 6 inches in a radius of 25 feet every 6 inches. And I thought, man, that's great. So I contacted a few of the ironworkers on the hill, and Arnie Harris says, "Well, why don't you use that roll that's outside?" And all we had to do was cut them to length, and it was remarkable how that happened.
Well, from then on, come putting building forms for the base. And then we had a rebar all around where the cement was going to go. And then they poured the cement.
2 cement trucks and 100 men poured the foundation.
There was a bunch of us around because we wanted to see it done.
In 1983, the situation in Butte had become dire. The town's largest employer, the Anaconda Company, had shut down its mining operation. The unemployment rate skyrocketed over 15%. Over 4 years, the community lost 4,000 members of their workforce.
People were out of work, and it was tough times.
The Lady of the Rockies project gave meaning to a community suffering.
Jesus and Mary took a handful of men that were out of work, and they went up on that mountain and they built a road that was out of solid rock. And then with 100 men, they took and they built a base.
I often ask myself, why was I picked or chosen? Why was it Joyce and I that were picked to do this? Because once we got on the mountain, the guys decided that it was always meant to be, maybe. And so I asked myself, why me? The answer to that was I knew the right people. It's pretty easy for a guy to have an idea, but how many people have got the great friends that never faltered and stayed with it?
After much discussion and design changes, Joe Roberts brought the idea to one of the welders at his equipment repair shop, Leroy Lee.
I was a welder for Roberts Rocky Mountains. They got this Mazzola to build this model. It was a 9-foot model. Aaron Roberts took me up and showed it to him, and he says, "Do you think you could build a 90-foot statue from this?" And I looked at it, and I said, "Well, where's the prints and the grids?" And he said, "Well, there is none." And I said, "Could you build a 90-foot statue looking at me?" And Joe said, "No." And I said, "Well, that's what you're asking me. I never built a statue before." A couple weeks went by, and Bob Bill came into the welding shop. He had this little 10-inch statue, a ceramic statue. I said, "Well, what are you doing with that?" And he said, "Well, some lady gave it to me, and I thought maybe you'd like to see it." And I said, "Well, I've seen statues before." He started to leave, and I said, "You better take this with you. It'll get broken here." And he said, "I'll pick it up in a couple of weeks." Well, a couple of weeks went by, and one day Joe walked in, and I said, "Joe, this should be the Lady of the Rockies with its hands out." And Joe said, "Well, who we get to build it?" And for the life of me, I can't believe I said it. I says, "I'll do it." Joe just stared at me, and he just walked out. And I thought, thank God he didn't believe me. So then he come back in again, and the next day, and he says, "Well, when are you going to start?" And I wasn't doing much good out there because I was walking around thinking about how I'm going to tell him I can't build this statue. So anyway, we went to the 4:30 Mass, and I looked up at the figure of Mary on the wall, and I said, "If you want me to build her, you better tell your son to show me how." And that night I come home, and I tossed and I turned, and I thought, how in the world am I going to tell him I can't build that statue? And all of a sudden it was like I watched a movie. How to draw the lines in the floor into squares, how to bend the iron. I couldn't believe it. That's how it come about.
The statue would be divided and built in 6 sections totaling more than 60 tons. Construction of the statue would take 3 years.
I would say I gave half my life to the lady. My poor wife, she calls her the other woman. She's been a big part, you know, from the beginning to when I did the prints for the lady. I mean, she worked with me on it. She was like standing behind me the whole time I was building that statue, just like Joyce was behind Bill.
When you looked at them coming up and doing what they did, and the people that volunteered, and the ladies and all that helped us, and the people that donated stuff, you just couldn't let the project go, and it was going to go. We just decided, and everybody just pitched in, and that's what we kept doing.
It was decided that the best way to bring the lady to the mountain would require airlift by helicopter. On a typically cold day in December 1985, a flight crew from the Nevada National Guard arrived in Butte to assess the feasibility of the airlift and determine whether the Sikorsky Skycrane helicopter could meet the demands of the project.
As the operations officer, I knew about the mission and I selected the crew, and then I got busy and kind of forgot about the whole mission until I got a phone call from my pilot that I'd put on that he had not properly gotten his physical completed and was grounded. I got to bed that night about 10:30. Before I left, I tried to get all my clothing and uniforms and everything together. And then I remembered I needed money in order to be able to go. I had $6. I asked my wife, she had 10. So with $16, next morning I got up at 6 and with very little preparation, very little information, we flew to Butte in the dark, in a snowstorm.
The pilot Comstock asked me, he says, how much is the heaviest piece? And I said, 9 ton. And he said, ooh, boy, that's right at the limit. He said, you don't think you can take some of that iron out of there? And I said, well, I'll take out what I can.
And I'm thinking to myself, we can't pick these pieces up. This is too heavy. But maybe we'll get lucky and we won't have to take it very far. And maybe we won't have to take it very high because altitude is really tough on a helicopter. And they pointed up to that spot where she is now. How do I tell them this can't be done? The challenges facing this project were weight and altitude, both of which the Skycrane excels at, but it's not Superman. It can't do things that it is just beyond its capability. I actually looked at the pilot's manual because I hadn't looked at it in a long time for this kind of altitude and so forth. It ran out. There was no chart or graph that showed what would happen at that altitude under those weights.
On December 17, 1985, the airlift began. The weight of the pieces would prove to be a major challenge for the helicopter crew and the men on the mountain.
The helicopter crew and the Lady of the Rockies crew said if anything happened at all, that we wouldn't take the piece up. So everything had to be perfect as we looked at it and they looked at it. Emotions were pretty high.
Over the next 2 days, the crew would successfully place 3 of the 6 sections.
Leroy Lee with a big smile on his face, Bill Barth with a big smile on his face, and everybody up on the crew is smiling, George James. And everybody up here is smiling. We've got her into position and we're home free.
Day 3 of the airlift, the hand section. The aerodynamics of this piece created problems as the piece was lifted up to the mountain.
Hoot Gibson said, we'd never work in the wind usually. I'd like it so we didn't have any wind today. And we were on the top of the mountain, we turned the corner, we went to the statue, it was dead calm.
As they flew the hand section over the top, we all reached up and grabbed a tagline. And I looked up and thought how beautiful them hands looked hanging down underneath that piece.
He was coming over the top of us, and pretty soon it started spinning. It got the air turbulence.
And they had ropes on them, and I looked over at the one corner, and there was ropes wrapped around one guy. He threw them off.
We were in control, but the load itself was fluctuating tremendously.
It just came on right through us, between us.
You know, it was a take your breath away moment.
And then For me, I was at the back side of the statue, and then the hand section came flying by and just stuck on the front of the statue. Then the helicopter seemed like it was going to go into the mountain, but then it dove away from where I was. All of a sudden, I thought the whole thing was just going to crash right there on the front of the mountain.
So we all ran to the edge of the cliff, and we watched the helicopter going down the cliff, going swaying back and forth.
The ground crew on the mountain were filled with terror as they rushed to the edge of the cliff.
When it first hit the side, everybody, their heart just dropped. They thought, my God, this is going to be the end of it.
I had my hand on the button to release it. And my first ever, if I had. That's an extreme situation. Because we were at the aircraft's absolute limits and our absolute limits. Losing that load would have been the most awful thing that ever happened to these guys.
Then he's going to drop it or he's going to set it down and smash the hands.
He managed to pull in some more power, a little more, and began to get the nose up, and we finally got some airspeed.
And then they were lucky to find a spot out at the airport to set it down where there couldn't have been, wasn't that much damage to that fourth section.
We couldn't go any further. If we were missing that section of the statue, that was it. We were going to have to stop. Who knew when we were going to get a helicopter back again?
The previous 2 days' excitement as this 6-year odyssey neared completion began to ebb away from the crew and was replaced with a sense of dread and the fear that years of effort were coming to an abrupt end.
That, for me, was probably the pivotal moment. And I think it's about that time people understand there was a bigger power up there than just us. And I think everybody was involved in that period. I might have had the words, but the thoughts were going through everybody else's mind that, Mary, you need to help us get this done, because we realize that we aren't in total control here.
We all came up here for our own reasons, and we're all dedicating ourselves to this project for whatever each of us has to offer. We're offering our skill, our ability that we've learned over the years, and we're offering it up that we get this project completed for the people that have involved us in this. We thank everybody here, and we thank the one up above who brought us here. And let's bring this baby home to a happy conclusion, and we need her help to do that. We got the skill, she's got to help us. So let's get her up there.
It just seemed like everybody just joined in, and everybody held hands, and Jim said a prayer. Tears were there, and emotions were very high.
And I'm telling you, I'll never forget it. It was like you threw a little light switch. And we said our prayer, the wind went to 35 knots, and the rest is history.
It means a lot different to different people. They see the pictures and all the memorials in there.
To me, it's a miracle. You go back and you go through the whole thing, and it's just unreal. I mean, you cannot believe what happened up there, and why that statue's up there.
Love and faith is the 2 words that I have to describe it in, and I think that is so true, and it's even more true today.
Day 4 of the airlift. The face of the lady looks back at the city that had turned a promise into a reality, as it made its way to the top of the Great Divide. 6 years leading to this final moment.
As soon as I got the statue head in place, we had the topping ceremony that we gently laid down beside her.
And we put that last piece on, went down and looked up in front of it. It really made you feel good. Made your heart feel good.
Everybody was hugging everybody. It was really kind of a fulfillment for everybody's dreams and aspirations, I guess.
That was when my son asked me, Dad, what do you get paid for this project? I said, son, the night the lights are turned on.
The entire city had to be watching. I mean, it was just, there's certain things that you will never forget in your entire life, and that's certainly one of them.
So we pulled up to 12,000 feet and then came back around slowly in front of her to see her in her entirety for the first time.
To look at all the men with tears in their eyes, and after 5 years of working on it, the feeling was indescribable. I mean, it was, and then to look up at her face, I mean, I guess I can say it was the happiest day of my life.
The chopper come up and the statue turned completely 180 degrees around. Like I was looking at the crew, and my wife was up there, and it was truly the greatest day of my life. And I still had her, and the promise was completed. I love the lady, and I love my wife, and I love the people of Butte. They're great people.
So as I started across the highway, I looked up. Bobo Bill and electricians had stayed up to put the lights on the statue. And I was crying so hard by the time I got home, and my wife put my head on her lap and she kept asking me, "Leroy, what's the matter?" And I said, "Why me, Pat? Why was I chose to build this? I'm a nobody." And my wife said, "When Jesus and his mother want something done, they always pick a nobody." So if anybody out there asks you people, who built the Lady of the Rockies, just tell them it was a whole bunch of nobodies.
Everybody bought in. Now it's part of the community.
I think we can accomplish anything.
It's just a wonderful sight, you know.
One of the most rewarding missions that I had ever undertaken.
Couldn't think it would be done, but it is.
I was glad to be a small part of it.
And it allowed people a place to pull together.
It's in my heart, so it's hard to put it in words.
I know I look at it and it's just statue, it's a memory.
We were all proud of each other and what each one done.
It was done out of love and faith.
Our Lady of the Rockies, a husband's promise fulfilled, a community's effort, strength, and commitment triumphant, and 30 years later, an enduring tribute stands on the mountain.